that, we're going to go to Fox 19's Ben Swann. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Sorry you're there a little bit late today, but better late than never, and we've got plenty of time for you. And, of course, we always find time for you and your reality checks. You've been doing such a fantastic job, and I'm blessed to have you on the program every Tuesday, cluing us in. Let's talk about the local Afghan soldier.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting story. We were covering a few weeks ago this Staff Sergeant Robert Bells. You know the story behind it. U.S. government and U.S. military says that he was the lone gunman. He walked from his base out into these two Afghan villages, killed 17 people, burned their bodies, went back to base. Originally, they said it was some kind of traumatic brain injury. We talked about that a few weeks ago. And then the official story changed. He said, no, it wasn't that. He was drunk and he was a violent guy. Then there was an official, now the reality check we did a couple weeks ago was that there was an official report that was done by investigators in Afghanistan, and it actually paralleled the original reporting that Reuters had done, which was that there was not one lone gunman here, that there was a group of people, group of soldiers or contractors or somebody who went into these two separate villages and killed these people. That was the original, what Reuters was originally reporting after talking to witnesses who said it was groups of men, that there was a lot of gunfire, a lot of shooting, that they burned the bodies. The official report from the Afghani officials was that there was no way that one guy walked this distance. I mean, we're talking about, in all, it would have been, walking from the base to one village, then to the other one. In all, it's something like 4 to 5 kilometers that he would have had to have walked while being heavily inebriated, according to the U.S. military. So we talked about that. The story wasn't making a lot of sense, and they're not being forthcoming with information. The military's not.
Right.
Well, since then, what's changed is, number one, the official story's changed. And now the official story is, well, we know what happened, was that he walked to the villages, he killed people in one village, burned the bodies, he walked back to base. He stayed there for an unknown amount of time, and then he walked to the next village, and he slaughtered people there and then walked back. Now, not one bit of information or evidence is provided to explain how that happened or why they now believe that was the case. What's interesting here is the attorney who's representing Staff Sergeant Bells is now saying that he's running into roadblocks where the military had promised him access to witnesses that they supposedly had talked with,
right,
who were in hospitals. Then he comes to find out that, well, those witnesses have been released. We don't know where they are. We won't be able to give them to you.
Huh.
So
how convenient.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, I mean, I know it's a constitutional right that, criminals have an opportunity to get all the evidence that's going to be used against them in a court of law, and that would include witness testimony and eyewitness testimony.
Well, then the other thing that's happened is his attorney says there's a number of written documents and written information that the military is using to base this story on. And the attorney was promised he'd have access to it, and now he's saying they're refusing to give him access to it. So, there's a lot of secrecy around this. This is not to say the Staff Sergeant Bells didn't do this.
Right.
But the bottom line is there needs to be some transparency, because the idea that the official story wasn't lining up, and now the military's story continually changes to kind of fit. It's almost like, here's the end result, and now as we work our way backwards to make the story fit.
I can see, Ben, how that you can conclude that, but let me throw devil's advocacy out there, because, in the aftermath of any crime, it often takes quite some time to figure out what happened.
Yes.
And you may come to a conclusion, the most recent shooting of that Trayvon kid, right?
That's right.
Everybody came to some immediate conclusion that a racist tracked and gunned down a poor, defenseless little kid, and it turns out that, after a few days looking into it, such was not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So, sounds suspicious, but people come up with conclusions and knee-jerk reactions, and that people cling to in the outset when later on the facts actually turn out to be something different.
Well, and that's the issue. That the issue here, this is where it's almost the opposite of the Martin case, is that the attorney for Staff Sergeant Bells, his family,
right.
There's a lot of folks who are saying, look, we're not interested in simply the conclusion that we're given via some anonymous spokesman. You see all these anonymous spokesmen from the military who spoke anonymously because the investigation is still underway, which means there's no one actually attached who's responsible for any of the information being put out. And yet, when you ask for, give me some details, give me some evidence. And I'm not even talking about me as a journalist or any journalist. I'm talking about when the attorney for the accused says, I'd like to see some evidence here so we can begin to explain our defense. Well, we're not going to give you access to it.
That is shenanigans right there, Ben. Right
That's
there.
Right.
He deserves it. It's his defense, whether it or not. He's entitled to the information. The attorney's there representing him, and they should hand it over. Until you get that, you obviously are going to have bunches of raised eyebrows of suspicion. Ben, can you stick around for another segment?
Sure, we'll hang out.
All right, I tell you what, stay on the hold. We're going to continue because I got to ask you about your interview with Rand Paul. Stick around. More Ben Swann right after this. Fox.
Where money talks. From the Steve Perrin Coordinated Financial Planning Studios, this is 55 KRC, the talk station.
843, 55 KRC, the talk station. Brian Thomas here, continuing a segment with Ben Swann. Fox 19 does reality check, among other things. And Ben, I had to ask you about this, and I thank you very much for holding over on the break because I wanted to hear about your interview with Rand Paul.
Well, we have set up to do something with him this week, so we haven't actually talked to him yet. But I'm very excited about this because the offer was made for him to come in and sit down and talk to us about a variety of issues. And a couple of things that I'm hoping to touch on with him is you probably saw this, the stance that he took in the U.S. Senate against the Iranian sanctions, based on the idea that those sanctions would also translate into a declaration of war of some kind or use of military force. And because they were trying to push through those sanctions without any floor debate, any floor discussion whatsoever, just to kind of do it on a unanimous motion. And so, he made a pretty good speech about it, explaining that this body of lawmakers has consistently and regularly approved, in the name of sanctions, all kinds of military action. And so he wanted to make it clear that was what they were not voting for. So I want to talk to him a little bit about that, kind of his view on how far, this body's kind of overstepped its bounds.
Well, and I'm glad you're doing that. I have talked to him any number of times, Ben, and I found it to be he's a logical, rational, consistent, doctrinally and politically consistent guy. And it does a great job, I think, maybe even better than his father about articulating his position and why.
Yeah. Well, he really does do an excellent job with that. And the bottom line is, he has, like his father, he has this guiding principle of the Constitution as the rule of law, and therefore we're going to follow the Constitution. I think it simplifies kind of the stance on a lot of issues because you don't have to, every issue does not have a different kind of standard behind it when you apply the Constitution, which is all lawmakers are supposed to be doing.
Ben, I tell you, we talked all morning about the comments last week with the Supreme Court, Barack Obama's comments and attacks yesterday at the Supreme Court along those exact same lines. This ain't so much about Obamacare as whether or not the federal government is checked in power anymore, and that's what it's going to be decided. When's that segment going to run, Ben?
Well, we're hoping that it runs by Thursday, but obviously we have to figure out all the details. But I'll shoot you an email to let you know for sure when it's going to be.
Please.
One other thing too, I want to ask him about this. I know he didn't say it, but his dad said it this past weekend. Said that his goal in staying in this race is to try to save the Republican Party. I don't know if you saw that quote. I want to ask him about that too. I thought it was a very interesting statement. He thinks the Republican Party is kind of committing political suicide with some of the stances it's taking. So.
Well, you know what, Ben? I think I'm going to agree with him on that. Please let me know when the segment airs because I'm definitely going to tune it in. I know my listeners are going to watch it too.
For sure, Brian.
Ben Swann, I'll be looking for you on Fox 19. Thanks very much for your time. I'll talk to you next Tuesday, all right?
All right. Thanks, buddy.